Good morning. It's News Radio 710 KEEL. Robert J. Wright and Erin McCarty, and standing by is Louisiana Secretary of State, Mr. Tom Schedler. Mr. Tom, how are you this morning? Thank you for taking a couple of minutes for us.
Be glad to, and always honored to talk to those folks in North Louisiana.
I gotta tell you, the numbers from Texas came in that the voter registration numbers are way up. I know you don't have your numbers yet. It's going to be a few more days, but are you seeing the interest across the state for more people going and registering to vote?
Yes, ma'am, we are. I'll tell you what, we had a brisk increase. I guess about 45 days out that we saw, and then it slowed down some. And as you indicated, Louisiana, we have the cutoff was the Tuesday, but we have a delay from the standpoint from this is that the register of voters have to verify that it's not a duplicate registration, make sure they're in the right precinct and the like. So there is about a 20-day delay on that here, but we did see. I don't want to say unbelievable increase, but there was certainly an uptick.
You know, Mr. Tom, not to get way off track, but you mentioned something interesting, and I see, good heavens, it's like every day I go to the news website and I see voter fraud here, voter fraud there, voter fraud across America. What kind of steps, what kind of precautions do you as Secretary of State are in your system to prevent that kind of voter fraud?
Well, let me say we have several methods. Number one, we have a vigorous fraud unit here that probably staffed better than most states. Secondly, one of the things you hear about is dead people voting, and of course there's a folklore in Louisiana about that, certainly, and I combat that daily. But
well, certainly not north of Alexandria, for heaven's sake.
Well, let me say this, that's right. But we're very vigorous with getting a monthly report from Vital Records on deaths. We are very vigorous with getting a monthly report from the Department of Corrections on felon convictions, and we aggressively send that to the Register of Voters, and those individuals are removed. We also are very aggressive not only on the registration side, because Louisiana ranks third in the country at 86% of eligible voters registered, but we're also just as vigorous on cleaning up that list, on list maintenance for those people who moved out of state and the like. So I've always said this to folks. I would never look anyone in the eye and say that 100% there's no voter fraud. I would never say that because I'd be, first off, I don't believe it myself. But the second thing is this, is that I think it is way overplayed in many jurisdictions. And I've heard all the stories. I've read all the blogs. But when you get down to it, can you find an alien, non-U.S. citizen that voted? Yes. Can you find a felon that's voted? Yes. I can give you all those scenarios, dead people and the like. Mm-hmm. I personally think that it's not quite as bad as what it sounds. And always remember this, when you're leading up to a major election like this, both major parties are setting the stage for potential contestants. And the best way to do that is to create all this illusion that exists. And I'll give you one great example that's playing out right now. It says cyber attack of the election by the Russians. Let me just say this to you.
Yeah.
There is no state in this country that allows voting on the Internet with two exceptions. And that is for military and overseas voting, and that's dominantly in the state of Alaska and some counties in California. But no state votes on the Internet, so how can you cyber attack an election in cyberspace when you're not in cyberspace?
Mm-hmm. How crazy is the attention? This election, I think, Tom, it's going to be one of the craziest we've ever had with the Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton. A lot of people say they don't want to vote. A lot of people saying they're just going to close their eyes and vote. Are you hearing a lot of that all over the state?
I'm hearing a lot of it, and I just got finished a year stint as the national president of the Secretary of State's Association, and I will tell you that most of my colleagues, when we last met as a group, were anticipating, in generalities, a lower voter turnout, or at least a lower voter registration as far as the President of the United States election.
Really?
That has changed some.
Okay.
And evidenced by the first state out with early voting, Ohio, this week, where we saw a very brisk turnout. So that number, Erin, has fluctuated back and forth. I mean, we from an historic standpoint, in 08 we were around 67 with some tenths of a tick, and then we increased that in 12. We were only one of two states that increased voting attendance from 08 to 12. And I will tell you, Louisiana is above the national average. But with that being said, I'm like you. I've heard many a person say I can't vote for either candidate, or they're voting against another candidate, not really for the other. And I've heard many that say I'm not voting for president, I'm going to go down ballot. So we've had all of the above, but you still have a very angry electorate out there on both sides of the equation. I personally think, there's been a long-term damage done in this election.
Mm-hmm. And yet, Mr. Tom, you said a second ago, and I think this is kind of awesome. You said 86% of eligible voters in Louisiana are registered. Is that right?
That is correct.
But do you think this year, do you think in November turnout's going to be a little lower despite that high number?
I do, because keep this in mind, Robert, the highest voter turnout in Louisiana history is still the Edwin Edwards David Duke gubernatorial election. Mm-hmm. It was 72-73. The second highest turnout was the last two presidential elections, which were just shy of 69%. So there's a statistic that's somewhat startling. Even though you have that 86% eligible voters, there's a huge amount of people that are registered to vote that have never, ever voted. There's another huge amount that only vote every 4 years in a presidential election, and usually only for the top of the ballot for the president and nothing else on the ballot. So the statistics are somewhat skewed, and it's surprising. It can be a yawner of a subject, but I can tell you when you get into some of the demographics and data on this, it's really very interesting.
I'm sure we will talk more about that soon, Tom. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Great stuff as always, Mr. Tom. Thank you very much. Hope to have you back again soon.
Likewise. Bye.